Welcome on my YouTube channel. He was the most expensive hostage in human history. His annual upkeep, paid for by his own brother, could fund an entire army. The Pope himself was his personal jailer. For 13 years, every king and emperor in Europe schemed to possess him. Yet this man wasn't a criminal. He was a prince, the son of the world's greatest conqueror. He was a poet, a general, and the rightful heir to the most powerful empire on earth. So why was he locked in a golden cage? This wasn't a simple kidnapping. This was the result of a terrifying flaw in his family's design for power, a flaw that turned a prince into a living insurance policy. A man too valuable to set free, and too dangerous to ever let go. This is the story of what happens when a family's ambition becomes so great, they decide to outsource their brother's imprisonment to their greatest enemies. To understand how a prince becomes a prisoner, you have to understand the system that created him. Cem Sultan was born at the absolute height of the Ottoman Empire. His father, Mehmed II, was the man who conquered Constantinople, a living legend who had shattered the walls of a city that had stood for 1,000 years. Cem was raised to be exactly like him. He was brilliant, charismatic, a gifted military strategist. He was given provinces to govern, armies to lead. He was the perfect imperial son. But in the Ottoman Empire, being the perfect son wasn't enough. Because the empire had a fatal design flaw, a rule written in blood: winner takes all, and the loser dies. When Sultan Mehmed died suddenly, the race for the throne began. Cem's older brother, Bayezid, was closer to the capital. He seized the treasury, won over the army, and declared himself sultan. Cem, the brilliant general, fought back. But he lost. And in the Ottoman system, losing meant death. So he did the unthinkable. He fled. He sought refuge with his empire's sworn enemies, the Knights of Rhodes, believing they would help him reclaim his throne. He thought he was asking for an alliance. He had no idea he was walking into a business negotiation. The knights greeted him with feasts and ceremony. They called him an honored guest. But behind the smiles, they saw something far more valuable than an ally. They saw leverage. Within days, messengers were racing to the new Sultan Bayezid. The deal they struck was both simple and monstrous. Bayezid would pay the knights a fortune every year, 45,000 gold ducats, an amount that could cripple a lesser kingdom. And in exchange, the knights would ensure his brother, Cem, remained their guest forever. The insurance policy was now active. As long as Cem was alive but captive, the Sultan was safe from civil war. And as long as the Sultan paid, the knights got rich. The only person who lost was Cem. His golden cage was built. For 13 years, he was passed from castle to castle, from France to the Vatican. He was a living chess piece, controlled by popes and kings who used the threat of his release to keep the Ottoman Empire at bay. He lived in luxury, but every door was locked. He wrote heartbreaking poems about his exile, a prince rotting in a gilded prison. But insurance policies eventually expire. When the King of France invaded Italy, he seized the now 45-year-old prince, planning to use him to lead a new crusade. But then, Cem suddenly died. The official cause was dysentery. But the timing was too perfect. Contemporary accounts describe a far darker end. A slow-acting poison. A final gruesome invoice from the Pope, who couldn't let his most valuable asset fall into French hands. A horrific scene in a Vatican apartment, a man strapped to a chair, his body mutilated, a final brutal message sent to all who would seek to control him. The prince who was once the hope of an empire died a pawn, his life a transaction from start to finish. His story is a terrifying lesson in how the cold logic of power can corrupt everything, even the bond between brothers, turning a man's life into nothing more than an entry on a ledger. Imagine a building that heals its own cracks. A harbor that gets stronger the more it's battered by the sea. A structure that has survived 2,000 years of earthquakes, floods, and the rise and fall of civilizations. This isn't science fiction. It's the Pantheon in Rome. It was built 2 millennia ago, and it still holds the record for the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Now, look at this. This bridge was built 50 years ago. It's already decaying. Our modern concrete, the bedrock of our civilization, has a lifespan of about a century, if we're lucky. So how did the Romans build for eternity? And why, with all our advanced science, can't we? For centuries, This question has haunted engineers and historians. It was a lost recipe, a piece of impossible technology from the ancient world. But recently, a team of scientists at MIT decided to solve the mystery. And what they found wasn't just a forgotten ingredient. It was a revolutionary technique that could change the way we build our world. This is the story of how we uncovered the secret to living concrete. For decades, we thought we had the answer. The secret, we assumed, was volcanic ash. The Romans mined a specific type of ash, called pozzolana, from near Naples. And it's true, this ash made their concrete incredibly resilient. But it didn't explain the biggest mystery of all, the self-healing. Archaeologists would find Roman seawalls that had been submerged for 2,000 years and were stronger than the day they were built. When they looked at the concrete up close, they found something strange. Tiny, white chunks scattered everywhere, like flecks of chalk. For years, scientists dismissed these as a flaw. They thought the Romans were just sloppy mixers, that these lime clasts were evidence of poor quality control. They were wrong. That flaw wasn't a flaw. It was the entire secret. The MIT team had a radical idea. What if the Romans put those white chunks there on purpose? They decided to recreate the Roman recipe, not by trying to make it perfect, but by recreating the flaws. And they made a stunning discovery. When a tiny crack forms in the concrete and water seeps in, it reaches one of these little white lime clasts. The water activates the lime, triggering a chemical reaction that grows new calcium carbonate crystals. These crystals spread out, filling the crack completely, sealing the damage before it can spread. The concrete wasn't just strong. It was alive. It had a built-in immune system. The very thing that would destroy our concrete, water, was the trigger for Roman concrete to heal itself. But there was one more piece to the puzzle. How did they get these reactive lime clasts into the mix? The answer was even more shocking. They used a process called hot mixing. Instead of mixing everything with cold water like we do today, the Romans added water to quicklime, a far more volatile form of lime. The chemical reaction generated intense heat, reaching hundreds of degrees Celsius. It was dangerous. It was counterintuitive. But it was genius. This heat created chemical compounds that simply don't exist in modern concrete, making the final material denser, more durable, and embedding the self-healing lime clasts perfectly into the structure. So why does this 2,000-year-old secret matter so much today? Because our world is built on crumbling foundations. Concrete production is responsible for 8% of global CO2 emissions. We spend billions of dollars every year repairing decaying roads, bridges, and buildings. Costs.